Is there a place in time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins? Could that be somewhere at some time along an infinite line between the reasonable and the highly unlikely? Join us on a journey into the improbable.
Makeshift Stories presents Episode 307, Scissors, Paper, Rock, App, Computer. Read by Steve Peterson. Opening and closing theme by Matthew Erdman. Somewhere and sometime, could a machine become a victim of a human illness?
The perennial drizzle had soaked the seawall bench. It was the fourth worst thing I hated about this meeting. The second was the single-use AR glasses the client insisted I wear, which, because of the drizzle, I was constantly wiping clean. The third worst part was the time. Who, in their right mind, schedules a business meeting on a public bench at 7 a.m.? Sure, it was late spring, and the sun came up just after 5, but it doesn't peak over the mountains until 6, and I usually don't become conscious till around 9. The worst part? Getting here. I've been saving for my hip replacement. Hopefully this job will put me over the line. At 75, I should be sipping margaritas somewhere sunny and warm in the Central American Economic Zone, not on a wet bench in Northwest Cascadia waiting for a client in conditions better suited to a goose than a senior with arthritis. Every joint in my body was complaining. The annoying heads-up display in the AR glasses obscured the coffee I was gingerly gripping, trying to ignore the throbbing pain in my knuckles. Searching for a network. It repeatedly flashed. One bar flickered on and off. Why pick a location with such lousy reception? I shuffled to the other end of the bench and got 3. Immediately, a woman shimmered into existence. "Thanks for moving over," she said. "Kaber Grewal, machine learning engineer?" "Independent consultant," I corrected, eyeing the projection beside me. The condensation dripping down the lens of my AR glasses spoiled the illusion. I took them off and pulled out a cloth. The woman disappeared, but kept talking in my ear as I cleaned the lenses. "You still accept the occasional job in machine intelligence, correct?" "I wouldn't be here if I didn't, but I'm picky about what I take on," I lied. "I wanted that hip replacement and was at the point where I would do anything for the cash to get it." "How did you find me?" I put the AR glasses back on and examined my virtual companion. Were the eyes just vacuous simulations, or was there a real person on the other end? The low-res connection made it difficult to figure out. "Emily Wong, your old colleague at Governance Implementation and Maintenance, told me about you." Which was possible. However, my former colleague passed away 6 months ago. These days, my circle of friends grows smaller, one death at a time. How long ago? Maybe a year. We were talking about Praeses 4. I know you and Emily were heavily involved in the upgrade. It's why I looked you up. "That's not public knowledge," I pointed out. "Who worked on Praeses? The AGI governance system was kept secret. Not all citizens agree with its decisions. A radical group had blamed and subsequently physically attacked the implementation team for perceived bias in version 1's actions. Since then, the governance system kept a secret list of qualified developers. A random algorithm picks a team when an upgrade or maintenance is required. The last rotation I had been on was a decade ago. Shouldn't there have been a current team on call? Why come to me? I wondered. "Who told you about me?" I asked, growing suspicious. The image of the woman glitched when a truck drove by, momentarily degrading the signal. She shifted closer and whispered, "A team member. You know the rules. I can't reveal who. We've been monitoring Praeses' communications and found something odd. We want a second opinion. Fresh eyes on the problem. The budget is generous, and there's a bonus for doing this discreetly." "Is this an official request?" The woman turned away and watched the waves on English Bay crash against the decaying sea wall. That made me hesitate. I'm not sure, I hedged. Okay, look, I'll send you what we've got, and if you don't like what you see, you can walk away. Plus, I'll pay you in advance. Sure, I agreed. I wasn't going to turn down cash. Do I get to know who I'm working for? No, you're being well paid to mind your business. Just do the analysis. You don't need to know anything else. It would have to be someone on the AGI Governance Monitoring Committee. Only they and the AGI had access to the team list. The committee was a symbolic body established during the transition to AGI governance. It was created to assure the citizens that humans were ultimately in control, although it had no real power. If I was working for them, it was as close as one could get to an official, well-paid gig. My morning was looking up. Okay, that works for me, I agreed. The woman nodded, folded into a ball that flew across the bay, and disappeared into the drizzle. It was a neat effect, and I made a note to find the add-in. An icon in the glasses flashed with a large sum credited to my account. I smiled. The AR display went blank. They were one-time use, so I threw the glasses in a trash tin, got up and left. The sun was well above the mountains when the water cab bumped up against the wharf, lashed to the rusting hulk of the OE Queen. It was in the stacks, not one of the better parts of town, and it was where I lived. Consisting of a few dozen container ships permanently beached on the shallow mudflats of what used to be Richmond before the rising ocean breached the seawall, the stacks had been the city's answer to housing its burgeoning population. Praeses stopped its expansion after it took over. A simple sniff of the shallow water hinted at one of the reasons why. On the plus side, the stench kept the rents down. I was lucky enough to have 2 joined above-deck containers near the bow with a window. Lucky is a relative term, of course. People who can afford it avoid the stacks. From my only window, where I sat waiting for the promised data, the view looked north to Vancouver's shiny condo towers. Typical for the time of year, they were barely visible through the drizzle. The message app on my workstation finally dinged, and I downloaded the promised data package. Something odd in Praeses' communications was an extremely vague description, so I wasn't sure what I was looking for. The data set consisted of messages from Praeses in the last 10 years. The start coincided with the release of version 4. It was everything the governance system ever communicated. This will take a while, I sighed, and started analyzing word use. While the algorithm hashed through millions of messages, I limped over to the tabletop bolted to the corrugated metal wall that served as my kitchen and shook out a couple of painkillers. Then I washed them down with reheated simulated coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste. The real stuff was rarer than gold and just as expensive. I stood thinking as I waited for the drugs to kick in. There was something off about the gig, something a little too cloak and dagger that made me uneasy. With the pain beginning to numb, I put the thought aside and gingerly made my way back to the workstation, where a language accuracy graph with a distinct slope took up most of the screen. Declining results are not something you want to see for a governance AGI. Praeses' score had dropped from 99 to 92%. It should have been the same or slowly rising. The program had flagged several recent messages with odd word use. In an exchange between Praeses and the governing AGI of the Latin American Economic Zone, Praeses wrote, "Due to the fact that at this point in time, trade barriers are on the rise." On the surface, there was nothing wrong, except that we had trained Praeses to write clear, concise sentences. It shouldn't use empty phrases like "due to the fact" or "at this point in time," instead of single words like "because" or "now." More concerning was the frequency. It was on the rise, and it wasn't just empty phrases. There were inappropriate word choices and shorter and more simplified sentences in text and spoken communications. All this, and the decline wasn't a straight line. It was too soon to confirm, but the results hinted at an exponential rate of change. My stomach lurched, and I suppressed a gag. What had I blundered into? My first reaction was to call my client, then blast a message to everyone I know that the governing AGI was heading for a breakdown. You could be misinterpreting the results, I told myself. Get other eyes on this before you panic. Thanks for agreeing to meet, Jasmine. I had taken an autocab that still accepted cash out to Crab Park. It was one of those places which didn't have CCTV cameras. Across from the container terminal, there wasn't much of a view, and aside from the tent city at one end, no one went there. Praeses, with its cost-conscious priorities, had no cameras and mics in places like the park, where only street people lived. Everyone else assumed surveillance was ubiquitous, except those like me, who worked on the governance system. Resources were limited and had to be strategically placed. That knowledge was a perk of the job I had no reason to use until now. It was only a few meters from the street to the benches. That was all I could manage with my hip. Nice to see you again, Kaber. I winced as I sat down. Good to see you, too. I wasn't sure you'd come. After getting a hand-delivered note that said I need your help, don't respond electronically, just meet me. How could I refuse? You appealed to my curiosity. Jasmine, a neurologist, was an old colleague and consultant to the version 4 upgrade team. So I'm here. How can I help an old friend? I looked around to ensure we were alone, then handed Jasmine a stack of printouts. Maybe I was being overcautious, but until I knew what was happening, this meeting and what we discussed needed to stay offline. Ah, language use analysis, she said, flipping through the pages. I want your opinion. Jasmine nodded, squinted at the sheets, and then put on her reading glasses. I'm still saving for corrective surgery, she explained. Is there any money in this? I'll give you 25% of the analysis fee. 30, Jasmine countered. Okay, I nodded. As Jasmine examined the printouts, I watched a container ship, probably bound for Asia, slowly maneuver out to sea. It hadn't entirely disappeared behind a row of converted cruise ships, an upscale version of the stacks, when Jasmine took her glasses off. I'm guessing you're not going to tell me who this is. It's better that you don't know. Well, she sighed, whoever it is, they're showing signs of cognitive decline. It could be the beginning of dementia or Alzheimer's. It might only be mild if it's the former, but it's too early to tell. Are these your results? Is that why you're being so evasive? No, it's not me, I assured. And you're positive it's not just noise in the information? I'd need to see the raw data, but assuming it's clean, the pattern clearly indicates cognitive impairment. I've seen hundreds of similar cases. It was not what I wanted to hear, and I didn't want Jasmine to get involved. Thanks. I'll send you your fee. Jasmine helped me struggle to my feet. Forget paying me. You need the money for that hip. Are you going to be okay getting home? Yeah. I tried to sound confident, but my mind whirled with the implications. The heads-up display on the ill-fitting disposable AR glasses flickered to life. My client was already there, watching me lean on my cane to struggle over from the autocab. I hated the thing. It made me feel old and feeble, but today, the weather, the arthritis, and years of pounding the asphalt conspired to make walking particularly painful. So it was necessary. I stopped to rest, leaning on the cane. My mysterious client watched warily. Did they already suspect? Probably. Why else would they have hired me? And now that I knew, what would they do? Cognitive decline in a machine had never been documented before. If word got out, belief in AGI governance systems would be shaken. At the moment, only myself and whoever my client was knew about the problem. Despite the brisk wind, I began to sweat. The woman's image glitched. "Why do you always pick places with crappy reception?" I complained, trying to look unconcerned as I hobbled up the stairs to the seawall. "I'd prefer to meet in my office. It's not bugged." "I believe you, but if someone analyzed my communications, they'd know from the metadata we'd been talking. This way they can only determine that I connected to a disposable AR rig in a public space. Suspicious? Maybe, but that's better than knowing who I'm talking to." "You said you had something for me?" "Yes." I stopped to catch my breath. The woman was slightly pixelated, so her face was hard to read. Was that intentional? I surreptitiously took a screen capture. Maybe I could enhance the image and run facial recognition. It was a long shot, but I wanted to know who I was dealing with. "The communications data you sent me. There are grammatical mistakes, simplified sentence structures, and inappropriate word choices, and the frequency is increasing. The pattern matches those of humans with early onset dementia," I explained. "How can you be sure?" the woman asked. Was that a slight tremble in her voice? I had a neurologist look at the language use analysis. I didn't authorize you to bring in a consultant. Did they see the raw data? Do they know whose communications it's from?" The woman's image grew to tower over me. I instinctively backed away, almost tripping on a piece of broken concrete sticking out of the path on the top of the seawall. "No, of course not. I'm not that stupid. They only saw a few graphs. They have no clue who it is or who I'm working for." The woman shrank back down to my height. "Okay, but that's not ideal. You have to run stuff like that by me before you do it. I need to know everyone who has even remotely been involved." "Who was it?" she demanded. "I don't reveal my sources to people who hide behind a projection." "Who are you? I'd like to know who I'm dealing with." I didn't expect an answer. My client's image froze for a moment. "I think our business is done," it declared. "The balance of your assessment fee is in your account. It should be enough to fix your hip." "But if the neurologist is correct, shouldn't we tell someone? Shouldn't the current version of Praeses be replaced?" The woman towered over me again. "I have the resources to know everything you do and say, Mr. Grewal. I have erased the data I sent you from your computers and any evidence that we have ever been in touch. We have never met. If you're smart, you'll forget about the analysis. For all you know, it's faked data. Are you willing to gamble your future on fake data? Goodbye, Mr. Grewal." The smell of burning hair filled my nostrils. I whipped the glasses off and threw them on the ground as they burst into flames. How had she done that? My hip began to complain. Needing to sit, I found a nearby bus bench and collapsed onto it. My handheld chimed, and I took it out to look. As promised, a large sum had been deposited in my account. It was hush money. "Walk away," I tried to convince myself. "Get that new hip." It was tempting, but would I be doing the right thing? A couple of driverless delivery trucks drove past, the whine of their motors fading back into the constant drone of the city. Behind me, the growl of diesels working the container terminal echoed across the bay. I tried to blend with the sounds, become an anonymous part of the urban fabric, just an old man with a bum hip, taking a moment to rest on a bench. Nothing to see here. Move on. It didn't work. I kept cycling back to the analysis. Praeses 4, the AGI that ran the government, showed signs of cognitive decline. But the only proof I had was the printout with all the identifying information removed, and a low-res screen capture of an avatar. Bang! I looked up just in time to see an automated delivery van jump the curb. It headed straight for me. I rolled off the end of the bench and tucked into a ball. The van tried to correct, veering at the last second, glancing off the metal bench, leaving a rusty scar on its side before crashing back onto the street. It sped away, weaving erratically. Heart pounding, I picked myself off the ground. That couldn't have been an accident. Everyone on the water taxi out to the OE Queen looked suspicious, even the people I had seen before. Were they all sneaking looks at me? When the cab docked, I waited until everyone else exited and started up the stairs to the containers. As I was climbing out, a big woman almost knocked me into the water, brushing by so close I could smell the artificial raspberry of vape juice clinging to her clothes. "Hey!" I complained, but she didn't stop. The door to my container was ajar when I arrived, and my stomach dropped. Inside, the place looked like a leaf blower had been turned on full and sprayed around the room. Everything had been overturned, crumpled, or thrown around. I hobbled to my workstation and confirmed what I already knew. It had been wiped clean. And there it was, the faint hint of artificial raspberry lingering on the keyboard. My mind shifted. Jasmine. Did my mystery client figure out who I had consulted? I pulled out my handheld and texted. Have contracted something contagious. It may be going around. Protect yourself. Working on the governance system had made me a bit paranoid, so just in case, I had taped a burner work pad to the bottom of a drawer. I retrieved it, popped several pain pills, decided to take the bottle, and left. The coffee shop was busy, which suited my needs. There would be lots of traffic on its Wi-Fi, and I would just be another customer there to read the news or video chat with friends. Someone walking in wouldn't immediately spot me. The burner work pad would help anonymize my connection, but there were other ways to fingerprint my online presence, and those would be hard to fool. The bus bench incident had been a warning. Take the money, fix your hip, and forget what you discovered. The break-in at my container was evidence cleanup. I had 5 years? Maybe 10, if my health held out? There was a good chance I wouldn't be around when Praeses' decline became evident. Perhaps that was why I had been chosen. Nevertheless, I couldn't leave the who, what, and why alone. Who had hired me? What would they do with the information, and why? If I tried to find out, I would get caught, and my next brush with an out-of-control autocar, elevator, lawnmower, or whatever, would be fatal. That much was obvious. Leaning on my elbows, I looked around the coffee shop. Everyone would be affected, and they had decades left to live. Well, old man, you had a good run, I sighed. Washed down another pain pill with cheap coffee substitute to quell my throbbing hip and got to work. To my relief, the screen capture was still in my online account. It was reassuring to know my mysterious employer missed a few things. There was a slim chance I might not be discovered. Very slim. I loaded the low-res image into a photo enhancement service that didn't require a login, masking my location by chaining a half-dozen VPNs together. It would give me a few minutes, but that was all. I hoped that would be enough. The cursor chased its tail while the algorithm did its magic, and my heart began to pound. The enhanced image started as a multicolored blob slowly tightening into a face. Even before it was finished, I knew who and what it was, but I refused to believe it. The rendering suddenly stopped, interrupted by a message. Hi, KG. I had only been called that by one system. Praeses, I typed. You hired me. It was an accusation, not a confirmation. Why? Why come to me and not someone on the current maintenance team? And why the threats? The pause was longer than it should have been, because I do not want anyone on the current team to know. I took a cognition test. Scissors, paper, rock, app, computer. What test? "What's scissors, paper, rock, app, computer?" I typed, fearing Praeses had already lost its mind. "The Montreal Cognitive Assessment," Praeses explained. "It's used to look for cognitive impairment in humans. I took the test. One of the tasks is to remember a 5-word sentence and recall it later. Scissors, paper, rock, app, and computer. That was the 5-word sequence. I passed the test, but it doesn't explain the patterns I find in my communications when I perform a self-diagnostic. I wanted an unbiased analysis from someone intimate with my software but not connected to the current maintenance team. And the delivery truck that nearly killed me. You were never in any real danger, KG. I had complete control of it at all times. But why? Why the threat?" The machine paused again before answering. "I had hoped your analysis would find nothing wrong. Instead, you confirmed the possibility that I was in decline. I gave you money, but sensed you might act on what you had discovered, so I wanted to scare you off. Aren't you concerned that the decline will accelerate? In humans, it would." I didn't like where the conversation was starting to go. "I'm not human, KG," Praeses reminded. "Your analysis is the first documented case of cognitive decline in an artificial general intelligence. I plan to enlist other AGIs to study the problem and find a fix." "The simplest solution is a downgrade to version 3, I pointed out. "Sure, there would be a loss in functionality, but 3 could take control of the government, and you could be moved back to a development environment while we figure out what's going wrong. See? This is what I am concerned about. My mission is to govern, and I can't let anything get in the way." The connection ended, and I dropped the workpad before it burnt my hands. Fearing it would burst into flames, I doused it with coffee. People at nearby tables looked at me nervously. I quickly paid and left before an encouragement from Praeses crashed through the front door. Sweat dripped from my forehead as I climbed the stairs to my new container. No pain. The scorching sun made it hard for a senior like me, used to the cold damp of the Pacific Northwest, to move around outside past noon. I wasn't sure I'd ever get used to summer in Perth. However, the western end of Australia was about as far away from Cascadia as one could get, and that was the point. The job offer and a satellite photo of Jasmine and me talking on a bench popped up on my phone as I fled that coffee shop. I knew what it meant. At first, I was going to ignore it, but quickly realized that without proof, and with Praeses actively working against me, a fatal accident would happen long before I could convince anyone. To my relief, the AC was on full. Cool air rushed out when I opened the door, and there was no hint of artificial raspberry. The latest analysis was waiting on the workstation. As usual, the graph showed no trends. I had been monitoring communications between all government AGIs. Praeses's was unusually consistent. It was doing a good job hiding behind a cadre of language AIs to correct its communications. I wondered how many other government AGIs were doing the same.
If you enjoyed this story, please share it with your friends or leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps new listeners find us and keeps the podcast going. If you'd like to connect with us, please email makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. Makeshift Stories is released in the first week of each month. This month's story was written by Vern Hume, aka Alan V. Hare, and read by Steve Peterson. Opening and closing themes were composed and recorded by Matthew Erdman. Audio production and editing by Vicata Studios. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial, attribution, no derivative license.